Good evening and welcome to the evening version of COVID-19 Watch, where we discuss how, as a country, we can move forward stronger. I am your host, Stephen Duncan, and I am very pleased to be back with you again this evening. On Monday night, we enjoyed a very lively conversation about technology, how to take advantage of its endless opportunities, and how to inject it throughout our country to enhance productivity, increase competitiveness, and how to create newer opportunities. This evening, we discuss agriculture, the traditionally and once again the primary foundation of the Belizean economy. With the tourism industry being incapacitated by an anti-travel pandemic, the proverbial spotlight is shining directly on the agricultural industry. In addition to it now being the primary foreign exchange earner for our country, agriculture is being looked at as a primary candidate for investment, job creation, and as one of the sectors that may seem to be relied on compared to tourism. While factors such as the absence of formal trade agreements, the loss of preferential markets, and the expense of meeting some export requirements have stymied the industry to an extent, there is no doubt that agriculture is worth the headache. And today, we want to talk about how we can make it work for us. To help us do justice to this topic, we are joined by three distinguished gentlemen. Firstly, I want to recognize and welcome Mr. Jose Alpuche, CEO in the Ministry of Agriculture and Food. Welcome, Jose.
Good night, Steve, and good night, Belize. Good night, fellow panelists.
Secondly, Mr. Gilly Canton Jr., who is the General Manager of Valley of Peace Farms Limited. Welcome, Gilly.
Good night, Steve. Good night, Jose and Amilcar. Glad to be here.
And thirdly, we have Mr. Amilcar Sanchez, a small farmer from Mascal, who plants local vegetables and also does livestock production on a small scale. Welcome, Mr. Sanchez.
Good night, everyone. My name is Amilcar, and good night, Mr. Alpuche. Good night to everyone.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen, and thank you, Amilcar, despite your challenges you might be having there. I'm glad you were able to get in. We have you by audio, and we will work with that because we want you to be part of this conversation.
Sure.
To the viewers, I want to remind you that you can participate in this conversation. You may post your questions in the comments section either on Channel 7 or Colorblind's Facebook page. So, let us get started. And maybe I can start with Mr. Sanchez. Mr. Sanchez, as a small farmer, would you like to share with us what do you grow? What kind of farming do you do?
Okay, the farming that I do is actually vegetables mainly, but also I do livestock. Vegetables like onions, sweet peppers, tomatoes, also cucumbers, mushmelon, pretty much a variety of a lot of different smaller amounts of corn and stuff like that, but basically also livestock. And we do also produce a little bit of homemade cheese for locally around the village.
Yeah. So livestock, what do you do? Cattle specifically, or what do you do?
No, we do homemade cheese and also for slaughtering also. Both.
No, you said livestock. I was just trying to get what animal specific.
Yeah, livestock is like we do pigs and chicken and cattle.
I got you. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Gilly, could you tell us a little bit about Valley of Peace Farms?
Sure, absolutely, Steve. So Valley Peace Farms is a large-scale farming operation, mechanized, So we focus on corn, soybeans right now, and when our fields are a little more broken in, we'll switch to some of the edible beans as well. That's our row crop operation. And then we also produce sugarcane, which we sell to Santander. And then we also, I can talk a little bit about aquaculture because we also run Texmo Unlimited down south where we produce shrimp, Pacific white shrimp.
Wow, that's quite a varied area you're in there. And of course, we have the CEO of Agriculture, Mr. Alpuche. I don't know, Jose, maybe we can start off by trying to understand food security. Jose, to what extent is food security a little bit too optimistic for Belize? Or is it something that is within reach of Belize, or is it something that we've already reached in Belize? In your words, what does food security constitute?
Let me put food security, Steve, is equivalent to national security. If you can't feed your population on a regular basis, we would have serious difficulties in the country. Actually, here in the hemisphere, we have a few countries actually experiencing that problem, and we see the true need to ensure that a country like Belize remains food secure. Yes. The reality is that Belize, for its size, has the distinct pleasure of being food secure in most of our basic commodities. Okay. Corn, beans, rice, poultry, beef, sugar, of course, bananas, quite a list of primary commodities that we are food secure in. So we have the base. Where we need to expand is in processing. There's quite a bit of room for expansion there.
All right. So maybe I can ask Mr. Sanchez, in your context, Mr. Sanchez, what is your market? I mean, do you get into exports, or you're just really supplying the local markets? How do you dispose of your produce?
Yes, I only supply to the local market, not exporting. We had several years ago, we had a trade for export, but that was habanero at that time.
I got you.
That after that, we have not have an export pretty much, nor it was just local marketing.
Excellent. So how are you affected by the pandemic? In your local market scenario, are you affected by the pandemic, and how have you been affected?
Well, yes, definitely we are affected because we actually like selling our products were not the same demand. We had to modify and change the way we market because when the emergency state came out to be, it was very hard. It's not like you can go to the market and sell. We had to modify that. Yeah. And when that happened, we had to use more of our cell phones, and that's what really came out handy, because then we figure out who really we can sell and who it was much easier to get through. Nevertheless, we still have some loss because you cannot sell the quantity you had, but we find new ways to have buyers in other areas. So it was good, and it was had some failure in it.
Okay, thank you. Gilly, you're a much bigger player, and to what extent do you export? I get the impression that, in fact, with the sugarcane, you sell it to the factory out west, and the other things that you produce, is that produced for the local market, or do you have an export market?
Okay, so you're absolutely right. Sugar goes straight to Santander, and then Santander sugar, because they're a DPA, a designated processing area, that's all exported. Yeah. So that's strictly export. Yeah. Now on the corn side, and CEO Alpuche could probably talk a little bit to this, how important market access is. Our corn operation, the entire investment that has come into this country is strictly to serve the partial scope agreement with Guatemala. So our yellow corn goes pretty much 100% into Guatemala.
Okay.
The soybeans that we grow, that's a rotation crop. It's a legume, so it fixes nitrogen into the soil. So that does stay local, but the corn is all for export.
Yeah.
And if we talk about shrimp, Steve, this is one I think that is going to be most telling of the COVID-19 story around the world, because we were producing shrimp for export primarily. Now that export market is gone. I mean, it's 100% gone. Okay. And so you have to pivot and say, okay, well, we need to focus on local market until that export market comes back. And I think you're going to see a lot of that in agriculture. And you see this kind of nationalism movement happening around the world. So like Jose is saying, it's an ideal time to maybe look at some processing and see what we can produce locally and meet our own internal needs.
Yeah, what would have caused that export market to go though, Gilly? Because I mean, people still need to eat. So is it because with COVID, the movement of people had slowed? Is it that caused that?
Sure. I mean, if you look at the shrimp market for Belize, a lot of our shrimp went into the Caribbean, and we weren't really feeding a lot. We're feeding some Caribbean people, but we're feeding a lot of tourists in the Caribbean. There's no more tourists in the Caribbean.
Yeah. So the demand has really weakened there.
It's gone.
Yeah. And your thoughts on it coming back? I guess that's dependent on whether or not tourism comes back.
That's a very true statement. And then when it does come back, you're going to have a glut of, just like we saw with our beef and our chicken in Belize, you're going to have a glut of seafood on the market as well, because everybody has shrimp freezers right now.
Yes. Also, we had the pandemic did a very interesting thing to Belize, in that all of a sudden we found that we had an oversupply of some of these produce. So even as we talk about food security, the question becomes, how do we manage this kind of oversupply going forward? Because it is only good to the extent that you're able to keep it long enough to dispose of it over time, because not everything you'll be able to dispose of immediately. So how do we manage that? How do we handle that?
Actually, I believe it's a mixed bag, Steve, because we had that phenomenon of oversupply, mainly for products that are produced only for the domestic market.
Gotcha.
Poultry being a prime example, where because of the immediate collapse of tourism, and I don't think we've ever had an instance like this. There was no gradual decline in the market. It was knocking the switch off overnight.
Yes.
So we had quite a bit of product in storage that, as you saw, they were actually giving it away to the frontline workers to the value of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and also to 2-for-1 deals. We had a different kind of effect for the likes of cattle when the borders closed, because then we had an immediate glut. The third element that we had was that in some for some products, we actually have to increase production. Some of the grains and legumes, we decided to keep all in country to guarantee food supply for the Belizean population first, and then we export what would have been the overs, the balance.
Yeah.
But what we found out that in holding it back the way we were compelled to do, we actually had a shortage for export. So it actually showed that for some product we would need to increase production a little bit more.
To both satisfy the local market and have some for export as well.
To satisfy and indeed to have a bigger buffer that we would be able to export.
Yeah. Mr. Sanchez, what was your experience? Were you one of those farmers that found yourselves with, did you have an oversupply, or did you find yourself with a shortage during the pandemic?
Well, for some of the things, yes. shortage, and with some, well, you know, in the cattle aspect or the livestock aspect, then it was, you know, over demand, because even today now I still have cattle that I can sell for slaughtering, but they're not open as yet to sell. So
Okay.
that there is they're there, and we don't have any sell for it as yet.
All right. Which one of the crops you had an oversupply in?
Well, usually, like it will be like tomatoes and sweet peppers that, you know, in at the beginning, but eventually, you know, the market started to switch to a certain way that the people were knowing what was the regulations and rules to go by, and then it was much easier to flow. In the beginning, it was like it was there.
Okay, I see. So does that mean then that you lost money at that time? Because especially tomatoes is not something that you can keep very long.
Yes, yes, yes. That at that time, yes. But then eventually, like what I said, because the tomatoes will definitely be lost, but at the ending part, it still could have been sold some of it.
All right, excellent. Yeah. Gilly, how have you guys handled storage? What is that like in your neck of the woods?
Right. So we're fortunate. Grains store pretty well for 9 months to a year. So we haven't had any storage issues, and the government has been very good about keeping the border open so that the trade with Guatemala can continue. We've had to put in some additional measures, such as a customs guard accompanying the folks coming in to purchase corn, but that has been going. And to be honest, I expect to be finished with corn within a week or two. For my part, I know Spanish Child and some of the other communities have a lot of corn yet to go, but storage has been fine. On the shrimp side, we were fortunate enough to secure some storage space at one of the processing facilities. But that's more of a concern, I would say, is on that cold storage than on the grain side.
Oh yeah, but in the case of the shrimp though, is it just an issue of the market demand kind of drying up, or are we comfortable now that we're in a place where we can produce the shrimp with the challenges we had recently, the disease? Are we back on track?
$1 million question.
Okay.
Everybody, I think all the farms are in a different place on that. Our farm, we don't know that we're not there yet. We're still running some experimentation. We had a profitable cycle if we could sell. So profitable if we could sell the shrimp, but not where we'd want it yet. So we're still trying to get there. I would say we're back on track 100% yet, but moving in that direction.
So in that context, even without COVID, without the shrimp, still we were not really ready to meet that demand, the market out there, even if the demand was there.
Well, shrimp is a commodity, and so CEO is probably a lot better positioned to talk about this than I am. But the thing with a commodity is you have to produce it at a competitive price on the world market, and so we do a fairly good job in Belize, but what we always go for in Belize is these niche markets. So for example, right now the industry is going for its Aquaculture Stewardship Council certification. That allows us to get niche markets in Europe, which then allows us to get a better price, and so then we can compete. But our farms cannot compete with shrimp from Ecuador and India and places like that. Our cost of production is still too high. So the short answer to your question is, that market access comes back. If we can get into the right markets, absolutely we can compete. Meet the entire demand, no, but find a good place for our industry, absolutely.
All right, excellent. CEO, in terms of opportunities coming out of this, if in fact everybody has some shortage and Belize has this food security, so to speak, that we talk about, have new markets opened up to us during this period?
I think what we are hoping to secure new markets within CARICOM.
Okay.
I think CARICOM is a very finicky market to get into, but I do believe that we're in dialogue with at least 2 countries to look at increasing exports to them.
Oh,
Actually,
excellent.
they have also, through this, actually requested Belize to provide technical assistance to them in their agriculture sector.
Oh, excellent.
So it's creating a new dynamic in our relations, certainly within CARICOM.
All
What
right.
it has done too is it is pushing us to work harder on accessing the Mexican market and the Guatemalan market for beef in particular.
Okay.
But what Gilly said earlier as it relates to market, for shrimp, we're looking at attempting to finalize the process with Taiwan,
Ah,
potential for shrimp, as well as a potential for a few other higher end product coming from Belize. But
okay.
shrimp is one of the prime product that we could move into Taiwan if we can perfect that agreement pretty soon.
And we are expecting to do that pretty soon. That's what you're saying.
Yes, I'm hoping that indeed we can achieve it. There's a process that we have to go through within CARICOM because we're going into a bilateral agreement outside of the single market.
Yeah.
And we're in that process at the moment.
Is the quality of our product an issue, CEO, or is it in terms of the market access? I hear you in terms of Guatemala and Mexico. I mean, we have been kind of struggling with those markets for a little while. Is the quality of our product an issue?
For some product, yes, but in general, we do meet standards for whatever is being exported. Actually, Gilly would probably tell you that his corn is demanded in Guatemala because of the quality. And Belize is seen as a source in Guatemala in particular for the quality of corn that we produce. They get better yields from Belize corn than they would from some of the grades coming out of the US.
Gotcha.
And that is why we're able to compete in that market along with a giant like the Americans.
Okay.
So generally, we do produce and export high quality product. Our bananas remain in the UK market as a strong contender because we're producing for a particular niche.
Yeah.
But it's an industry that produces multiple packs specific to that niche, and we have a quality consistency bar none.
All right. Gilly, I don't want CEO to be putting words in your mouth, but he say your corn is in demand. What is available to us, Gilly? Are you guys planning to do anything new to add to what we are already doing? I mean, at some point, I heard CEO talk about increasing production in certain areas, in some areas. What area do you see that we can do more in, Gilly?
I mean, CEO said it. Processing is, adding value is the next big thing that we need to do. That's where you make money in agriculture, is if you can vertically integrate, or if you have a processing plant that processes, and instead of selling a raw material, you're selling a finished product. You're going to do much better. I get excited when I see what's happening in chocolate, and I just saw a new product called Brockdown or something like that on the shelves. These are exciting.
Dancing?
What's that?
Was it dancing?
It wasn't dancing, no. But if we can export our finished product, like everyone knows the stories of Marie Sharp and
Yes.
all that finished product. Now it builds our reputation in the world. It builds a quality of products that are coming out of this country. So processing is absolutely where it needs to be. As well as one other thing, diversifying our crop base is huge, because we have climate change coming. Our farm, we have this new hemp legislation in place, which is interesting. Now, our farm is probably going to be looking to cassava for the future, so because that's a drought-tolerant crop. So, if we can diversify our crop base, process diversification, I think.
All right. Well, I think that's a good point at which we can take our first break. What I'm going to do, when we come back, I want to go a little deeper into those areas, those new areas that you're talking about, and to see how we believe it can help to strengthen our food security aspect. We'll take our first commercial break, and so we ask our viewers, to just stay with us. We will be right back where we'll be continuing to field questions from our panels, from our panelists. Please stay with us. Welcome back to COVID-19 Watch, Forward Stronger. I am your host, Stephen Duncan, and I am joined by video call by the CEO, Jose Alpuche, Mr. Gilly Canton Jr., and Mr. Amilcar Sanchez. In our first segment, we discussed Belize's position regarding food security. You would know that we have one of the smaller populations in our region, and we have tremendous land to population mass. Fortunately, we are in a good position with food security, but actually, excess supply, drought, and climate change have been costing our farmers tremendously. We also spoke about the likelihood of the industry to be embraced as a less risky investment channel in light of the COVID-19 pandemic that has derailed our tourism industry. Now we want to hear directly from you, our viewers. You can comment, post your questions, or share your concerns in the comment section of our live stream on 7 News Belize or the Colorblind Multimedia Productions Facebook stream. The relevant panelists will respond. We can start with some of the questions already submitted. So firstly, let me ask about Mr. Sanchez, about storage. I think that's a very important point or topic for small farmers, well, actually for everybody. And especially, I spoke to you earlier about your tomatoes. What has been your experience with storage? Do you think we need to do anything differently?
Yes, I do believe that the storage is one of the biggest challenges, especially for vegetables, because of the proposed aspect right away. I think agro-processing or bottling or making a value add to our product will be a perfect thing, because whenever we have yielding production, we can sell the yielding production to I can say a mini factory, mini place to store it. But also it's a good thing if we can do that. Like if let's say we don't have like a Belizean tomato paste place to say, you know what, we can sell our tomatoes and have a tomato paste. Or we can say we have like salsa casera that have different vegetables inside of it, and say, okay, well, we can produce yielding production and then give it to the factory or the company that they will do the processing. Because farmers, not all farmers can do some the processing. We need to give it to an identity and then process. Yes. I think that's the window for the future, and that's also helps for hiring people in the factory, and also help for even possible exporting. And hopefully, I believe in the future we can export a product like that. It will have also foreign exchange. I know we heard the thing about not having that much foreign exchange.
All right. Yes. CEO, as a follow-up to what Mr. Sanchez said there, do you think GOB, I know for small farmers, a lot of them would not be able to put that kind of facility or infrastructure in place. Do you think GOB would consider state-owned storage facilities, for instance, to sort of accumulate and pool all these fruits, vegetables, what produced from the smaller farmers?
I think, Steve, Amilcar operates in one of the most unforgiving segment of the of agriculture, which is fresh produce.
Okay.
Consumers demand something that looks next to perfect.
Yes.
And that perfection only lasts literally for a couple of hours. before it begins to deteriorate. Storage is possible for some vegetables and fruit, but it carries up costs exponentially. And the minute costs rise too high in Belize, then we have the competition from importation, either legal or contraband. But I think what Amilcar said, I agree with him totally as it relates to processing. That is really the avenue for his segment of the market, which is highly perishable fresh produce.
Yeah.
Actually, we have invested in a small facility here in Bamopan at the showgrounds itself, where we're conducting the market at the moment. Okay. We do have a cool room and a washing station, a processing station for secondary processing of vegetables.
Okay.
But I must say that it was built pilot phase to see the use. Amilcar participated with us when we were running the farmers market here in Bamopan. But there's still quite a bit to be done as it relates to instituting grading and a pricing structure to match that grading. So there's quite a bit of work to do before we can get into deciding what would go into storage and at what cost, etc. But it's work in progress.
Yeah. But effectively, I think what Mr. Sanchez pointed out there is really using up the produce, not just in terms of trying to store it, but in terms of value add. So converting it to tomato paste, as he's talking about, for instance. So are we looking seriously at trying to, I mean, we've been talking about value add for years now, though, Jose. And are we looking seriously, or maybe I should ask the question slightly differently. Have we taken any steps towards that approach?
Yes, there's quite a lot of initiative. I must say, in this respect, I would say kudos to the private sector in the sense that they have gone ahead of government. But there are true stories which I would say here. We actually have difficulty retaining trained professionals in that field because it's a profession that's in high demand.
Yes.
Actually, we were having that discussion earlier today to see how we could acquire new expertise within the ministry to assist the farmers. We have recently, last year, invested in upgrading our facility in Central Farm, and we're looking at expanding the product base. Also to the Belize Marketing and Development Corporation, assisting those small operators that are already processing to improve labeling and actually assisting them to market on a consignment basis. And that is working very good for honey and for other products in which they're jointly marketing along with the small farmers.
Yeah. Gilly, how do people tend to see farming and agriculture in terms of this labor-intensive sector, etc. Is that changing? Do you see more mechanization? Do you see greater efficiencies taking place in the agriculture sector?
Of course, farming it's changing all the time. I have a lot of respect for the guys like Mr. Amilcar who are they're on the ground every day doing work that they in the soil, hands-on, every day. Our type of farming is different, but it's not different in the sense that you're not going to be in the dirt. Like, for example, right now as we speak, we have a weather window open, and my guys are going to work 2 shifts, and they're going to work right through the night. So I got 12-hour shift on, and I just got a text 5 minutes ago, said they got 95 acres in, they've got 55 more to go. So we work till 2, 3 in the morning to get it done in the weather window that's coming. So it is a labor-intensive job. If you're going to go into agriculture, and I would like to hear Mr. Amilcar's comment on this, it's a tangible job. You put something in the ground, you watch it grow, you harvest it, and feed your family, and there's a lot of satisfaction in that. So I don't think you can talk about agriculture and say you're not going to have to work hard. You're going to have to work hard. but it's a satisfying job.
I got you. In terms of the value add that we've been talking about, Gilly, is your group doing value add? I hear you're exporting corn. You said that earlier, and you sell the actual sugarcane to Santander, etc. Is there any value add in any of the things that you produce?
So, like Jose, like CEO mentioned, our corn in Guatemala is in very high demand because we produce non-GMO corn, and it's produced and sold within a few months. Whereas when you're getting corn from the States, it might be sitting in a feedlot, or sorry, not a feedlot, in a storage bin for a year or two, up to 3 years before you get it down here. So what we do for that is we do clean it. We do have ability to color sort, and so we do that for the corn. But in the future, we would like to do some additional processing, maybe make some cornmeal. I mentioned to you that we're looking at cassava, so we do a lot of things with cassava, like starches and flours and things like that. So we know that we have to get into this value add deal. We're not there yet. We're just kind of building up, but we would definitely like to get there. And what that does, if I could say, what that does is when you do put in a processing plant, it allows small farmers to feed into that as well. Like, for example, like Mr. Amilcar was saying, he would love a place to put his excess tomatoes and green peppers. If you have a large-scale processing facility put in by a large farmer that has a critical mass to feed it, then the small guys can feed in as well, and everybody grows.
So that would certainly assist small farmers as it relates to the export market, where maybe they are not able to access the export market individually by selling their produce to a larger factory operation. It then becomes part of the whole export process arena.
Correct. And you see this happening, like, for example, CPBL is trying this now with pineapples. So a processing facility is a very powerful thing for economic development, especially in our industry.
So what are they doing with pineapples?
They're promoting farmers, period, to produce more pineapple, and then they will juice them and start making a pineapple concentrate for both local market and export. They're already making it, but they want to expand that line.
So yeah, that will at least reduce the amount of juice or concentrate that they import to do their juices. So yeah, that's a good start. Very good. Mr. Sanchez, I don't know that a lot of people are lining up to get into agriculture. How do you see we can keep this going? What can we do to have young people get into this agricultural thing? I mean, I don't know if you have children and to what extent you've been able to encourage your children to be in and other young people in your neighborhood, in your community.
And it's a big, huge question, because it's one of the most difficult things, especially at this time. I have talked to a lot of young teenagers, and
yes,
they don't see agriculture as one of the things that they would like to do.
That's correct.
One of the reasons is because financially, everyone wants to see money, and they see also, especially in small farmers, the difficulty is to make that finance life, a stable condition of life. Like I was saying, the agro-processing or factories, I think will create opportunities because you will have more agronomy, more science on it, more technology, and then youths like more technology, and I think that will attract them in a certain extent. If agriculture does not attract the youth, we have a big problem in the future.
Correct.
Hello?
We will definitely have a gap somewhere, and we need them to continue this. CEO, I know we are beginning to run a little tight on time, so let me try to get you in here. Could you update us on the cattle trade? I remember that some time ago tried to work out something with both Mexico and Guatemala, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of trying to get cattle into those countries. How is that working? Maybe pandemic has stopped it, but I don't know. Give us a little update on what is happening.
Well, we've had an informal trade in cattle for about 30 years, mainly through Guatemala and we're told through Guatemala also into Mexico. But parallel to that, we had negotiated the sanitary requirements, the health requirements to export cattle for slaughter into Mexico and cattle for slaughter into Guatemala.
Yes.
In both countries, we had done literally a single export each, and then the private sector-led trade reverted to informal exports. With the difficulty we're facing with entering into Guatemala and the stopping of the informal exports, we've been working again with Mexico and Guatemala, and in both cases, we have obtained the ability to export not only for slaughter, but actually for fattening, which is smaller animals.
Yes.
The reality, though, is that especially in COVID times, these things take a little bit longer to materialize. Yeah. We've had animals in quarantine for Guatemala, and for Mexico just went into quarantine also. Okay. But we're waiting for the final documentation on the Guatemalan side to effect the first exports for the year. With Mexico, there is an issue of the crossing, but also there is a tariff that must be paid. For Guatemala, under the partial scope agreement that we have with Guatemala, these animals go in duty-free.
Recently, with the whole pandemic situation, there's a thinking that people want to switch from tourism to agriculture. What would be your take on that? Do you see that as a reasonable switch? I mean, we still have the vicissitudes of agriculture. We still have the vagaries, all of that to deal with. While we might be going through a low period right now with tourism, what would be your take on that?
As I equated earlier, our ability to feed ourselves is directly linked to our ability to remain a secure nation. So it's absolutely critical that we get more people into agriculture. If I'm to be quite honest, we've been working very hard on the agronomic side of it, things such as moving towards more climate resilient agriculture practices. We already have an IFAD program in place to help small farmers and small farmer groups like the one that Amilcar are in, yes. To help them to adapt to climate change. We're now working, however, I must say it's going a little bit too slow even for our liking, but these international funded projects sometimes go that way. We're now working with the World Bank to try to secure a similar program, but that would then be more for larger scale farmers and again aimed at climate smart agriculture adaptation. The other side though, Steve, that we need to work on, and we've done some work there, is to improve the business environment, especially as it relates to taxation. And let me explain, there's two levels to this. Okay. One is the fact that tariff duties are still charged on quite a bit of the inputs for agriculture and for agro-processing. Yes. And quite frankly, we have to stop charging duties on these inputs. Why? When the farmer put a seed in the ground, you don't know whether he will get, what the yield would be, whether he will get anything, or if drought or flood will destroy. Yet he would have already paid duties, yes. and he'd have loans to pay. So we really need to move the taxation away from the inputs and to the point of actually production. So let's tax the farmers based on success, not on attempt. That would be a far fairer way of taxation. The other element of it right now is that through some of the fiscal incentive and programs that we have, it tends to favor larger producers. And now, especially with amendments to the DPA, the recent amendments to the DPA legislation, which were in fact imposed by the OECD on us, these producers that are enjoying tax-free benefits can now sell on to the domestic market. Yes, they have to pay duty, but their entire production, etc., operates in a totally different environment. Well, quite frankly, small farmers like Amilcar would find it difficult because they're carrying the full tax burden.
Got you.
So government has already done some work on this in terms of eliminating taxes on some of the inputs. And I must be fair in saying that a number of the primary inputs, fertilizers, etc., don't attract duties. But there's a lot more of the inputs as it relates to packaging, as it relates to capital expenditure on equipment, including for processing for things like irrigation that we need to do further work on. That would create a business environment where there's equity amongst the large and the small, but also to equity in terms of we have to compete, and I have to take my hat off to the farmers. We are competing with imports, both primary imports and processed imports that are heavily subsidized in both the US and Mexico.
Yes.
So we have to look at agriculture from a different perspective and to tax it properly so that it can compete both on the domestic market, but also on the external markets.
Got you. All right. I think we're running out of time now. And on that note, I think that is it for question and answer time for today. So to the viewers who contributed, I want to thank you very much. And for our panelists, thank you too. Before we wrap up for today, maybe I should get some final words from you. Maybe I can start with Amilcar, Mr. Sanchez.
Yes, I know we have a lot to say. Mr. Alpuche touched some of the topics that were very, very important. Nevertheless, I believe agriculture should take the risk with venturing with opportunities that are out there. Sometimes we need to lose to gain, and I think that's one of the we should venture on like I say, balance is the way to go, and also packaging.
Yes.
When and where still needs to be known. Thanks, Mr. Alpuche. Thanks, Mr. Duncan. And I forgot the name of it.
Mr. Canton.
But thanks very much for the content. Yes. Thanks very much for having me on your panel, and I really appreciate that we are doing this, and the viewers will have a better understanding how agriculture is.
Yes, by all means.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Gilly?
Steve, thank you for having me on tonight. It's been a pleasure. I would like to echo what Amilcar said. I think both me and him were sitting here cheering as Jose was talking about tax reform for agriculture. That's huge. Yeah. But I'd also like to say, hey, that, agriculture is not an easy industry, but there's a huge future in it. The world is changing. Everybody wants responsible food, and we can grow that here in trees. So I think there's a huge future in it. People should be looking at it. And if we can get things done like what CEO was talking about, then we're going to be in a great place in agriculture in Belize. So thank you again, and have a great night.
Excellent. Thank you. And CEO, I'll give you the last word.
Steve, thank you for the opportunity for tonight, and thank you, Gilly and Amilcar, and all the other farmers and food processors out there in the country. Thank you for what you do in securing Belize. Earlier, we talked about youths. The ministry has been pushing School gardens we've been pushing World Food Days at schools throughout the country, primary schools at that, to reintroduce the concept of agriculture at that level, because that's when they're impressionable. I am heartened by the response we get from the kids. It is a growing demand for seedlings, etc., for school gardens to be put in, for World Food Day to be moved to particular schools. So yes, we're working with the existing farmers to try to improve them, to try and make them more climate smart. But I am very, very encouraged by the enthusiasm we see in our youth. Amilcar touched on a very important point earlier as it relates to science, but it's not only science in terms of agriculture, the agronomic, and the food processing, but it's also through digitization. We've been doing quite a bit of work in digitizing agriculture, georeferencing our farms, looking at digital marketing, looking at even remote sensing. So the field is huge, and I'm very, very optimistic of where we will go from here. Okay. We're on the right track.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys very much for joining me today and for your time today. And thank you for being champions for agriculture in your own rights. It was really a pleasure having you all today. Tonight on COVID-19 Watch, we had an in-depth conversation on moving forward stronger in agriculture. We immediately agreed that food security goes hand in hand with national security. Beyond that, productivity in agriculture earns us foreign exchange. It creates jobs, it earns the government revenues, and it contributes to our quest to reduce our trade imbalance. While we wait around hoping for tourism to make a massive bounce back, it's wise to start with what we have, and agriculture is central to all of that. With continued cooperating between public and private sector, investors, policymakers, and the tech minds, I am certain that we will be able to indeed move forward stronger. My viewers, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. We will be back on Monday when we will be discussing how we can move forward stronger with education. You're encouraged to return for more COVID-19 Watch right here on Channel 7 or on Facebook. Do enjoy the rest of your night and the remainder of your week. Take care.